Hey, before we get into the episode, I just want to tell you about my free astrology newsletter called the Starzologer. It comes out every Sunday. It's of a lot of interest for astrologers. I explore cosmic currents moving through the ever-changing skies. Most weeks I explore what's coming up in the week and also share some astrology sticky bits and throw in some ideas about buzzing around. You also get stretched with my Extend Yourself sections. So this newsletter is for aspiring astrologers or anyone who's trying to up their astrological knowledge. It's totally free and you can sign up at starzology.com/newsletter. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to the Starzology Astrology Podcast. I am your host, Alison Price, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Arwynne O'Neill.
Hi, Alison. It's great to be here again.
So nice to have you once more. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about an advanced natal chart topic, which is going to be the GAQUELIN sectors.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do you use these much in your explorations?
I would say I noticed them.
Yes.
I wouldn't say I've gotten super into them. It was one of those things that I do remember reading about when I was very first studying astrology.
Yes.
Because it's one of those things that that makes it seem like super legitimate. It's like, oh, wow, someone did a study. They were trying to debunk it. And it turns out that they found a statistically significant a factor. So effect. Yeah.
So this is it. It's one of those nice to have. It's definitely not one of the first things you learn, but if you are doing readings, you might as well know about it and pay attention if you see it or if you don't. So anyway, let's just cycle back a bit. So, and I'm saying GAQUELIN, it's French. If I'm, pardon my French on that, if I'm not saying it right. Yeah. So anyway, this guy, Michel GAQUELIN, and he has a wife, Francois.
Yeah.
And back in the day, he did a scientific research study to disprove astrology.
Yeah.
So he took hundreds of charts and was looking at what type of careers these charts had, and he noticed then which either planets or signs were on the midheaven, because that was his way of actually testing the astrology. And through all of this research and hundreds of charts, he came up with what is called the Mars effect.
Yeah.
Which is if you are particularly an athlete or sporty in any way, Mars will tend to be on your midheaven or near your midheaven.
Yeah.
And Mars is the planet that rules, running, jumping, and competing. Martial arts, competing, breaking a sweat, boxing, all of these competitive sports. Right. So after all these, and I'll put a link to that, the Mars effect, so you can go and dig into that if you want to. But what it came down to was that although he was trying to disprove astrology, they ended up actually proving astrology by using this particular research that he did.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, the thing that I was reading about it says that he actually studied people who were excellent in many different fields as well, and tried to sort of find correlations there. But the thing that made sports so good statistically is that it's more of a numbers game. It's easier to tell if someone, it's not so subjective. You could say like, oh, someone's excellent in this or that, field, but it's subjective unless you're talking about like their statistics, or of course money. But so with sports, it's just it's actually
they're either winning or they're not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. They've either got the gold medals or they don't.
Oh, they don't. Yeah. So anyway, so he came up with this idea that, or with all this research and that, and brought out what we're using today as what we call the GAQUELIN sectors, and these are areas of the zodiac at the midheaven, particularly, the angles at the midheaven and at the ascendant. These are your two main GAQUELIN sectors, but you do also get what I call minor GAQUELIN sectors at your IC and the descendant as well.
Yes.
Personally, I only look at the ascendant or midheaven unless I'm really having to dig deep in the chart to find something worthwhile saying.
Right.
But it really is a nice to have poke about.
Yeah. So
let's just get to it. So the GAQUELIN sectors are 10 degrees either side of the midheaven, left or right.
Yeah.
And above or below the ascendant.
Yeah. So that would be the 12th house and the first house, or the 9th house and the 10th house.
Yeah. So any planets in the GAQUELIN sectors are going to be affecting your midheaven and what you do, and your ascendant who you are
How
seen
you
to be.
present yourself.
Yeah. So the interesting thing with this is that if you have a planet that is conjoined the ascendant or the midheaven, that's going to be, I use an orb of 8 degrees, so that's going to be, any planet conjoined the ascendant will automatically be in the GAQUELIN sector.
Yeah.
So you would, so less than 8. But anything between 8 to 10, that's a planet that's not conjoined, but it's in the GAQUELIN sector. And this is what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Those tricky little planets that are just slightly out, but still in this position.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we, I do have an example chart I'd just like to run past you, and the link is going to be below this podcast, and you can pick up the link there to the actual blog post. So I've got the chart there for Justin Bieber, the singer, musician, call it what you will.
Yeah.
And his chart is there, and if you look at the, he's got Pluto in his ascendant GAQUELIN sector, which is fine. But that
rising, look at that.
Yeah. And also that is conjoined the ascendant. So you would have processed that anyway when you did the ascendant complex.
For sure.
But then when you look at the midheaven, he doesn't have any planets actually conjoined his midheaven, but Chiron is in that midheaven GAQUELIN sector. Yes.
Interesting.
It is because, not that I know that much about his music and his angst and what have you, but clearly it was quite a road he went to get to where he was.
Yeah. I mean, anyone who gets to be that level of famous, there's definitely some angst and
there's got to be. So we would want to interpret this particular Chiron. It's in the 9th house, and they're in that GAQUELIN sector. So it's bringing influence to his midheaven, and therefore his career, his public persona, his reputation.
Yeah.
And you may know more about his life story than I do.
Not really. No.
Okay.
Just a child star, and became incredibly famous, like very, very young. And obviously incredibly hardworking, whatever you think of his music.
Yes.
Yeah, which, I mean, that Venus on the midheaven, that's hardworking right there. That's someone who probably...
Virgo.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Did I say Venus? I meant Virgo. Yeah. Virgo on the midheaven. Hardworking, and also probably struggled a bit with fame. Probably, if not for maybe starting out really young and maybe having very powerful, influences, parents maybe. I don't know much about him, but yeah, it seems like someone who might not have actually sought out the spotlight in his original personality. Yes. I mean, he's a Pisces with Scorpio rising and midheaven in Virgo. That doesn't scream like wants to be in the public eye. No. So I would definitely think that there was some conflict there with getting to be as famous as he did. Yeah.
Now, frequently when you have Chiron connected to the midheaven, it brings in the themes of imposter syndrome. So we may never know because he's a public figure, but there may have been times when he said, "Why are they paying me so much to go out there and do this? Why am I,
Why are these middle-aged women throwing themselves at me and I'm only 15 or whatever?"
Yeah. So that is a particular, I mean, it's a very kind of prominent planet as well. Yeah. And also it is then, of course, the most elevated planet, which we haven't spoken about much, but it puts it in that position anyway.
Yeah.
Now, of course, let's get the argument clear here that if you're this sort of astrologer that uses a 10-degree orb on your angles, you're going to capture all the GAQUELIN sector planets as a matter of course.
Yeah, true.
But I never am. I like to stick to 8, and then anything 2, like this particular one, would actually stick out.
Yeah.
So even though, as I say, with him, the Pluto is also in the GAQUELIN sector, but we know about that already. And that, again, is in the 12th house. So clearly there is a lot, I want to say, much more deep depth to this person than we know just by watching him on his videos with his haircut and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure.
So that is one particular example of someone famous whom I could pick out who had a planet in this GAQUELIN sector. Now, again, this is not going to be the most important thing you ever see, but it's going to be a planet that you need to give attention to. And it would typically be more important if it was, say, the chart ruler that was in that position, or the sun, for instance, or a very prominent planet that would then modify the angle. So in general, when we're talking about these angles, we've spoken a lot about the midheaven because this is a very powerful point in a chart, and it's a topic we need to cover.
Yeah, definitely.
Represents the who you are in the world, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's the cusp of the 10th house. So the 10th house is the house of your career, your face to the world, your impact on the world, the mother also. there's that.
Yes.
And yeah, the midheaven is like the gateway to the 10th house.
Yeah.
That stuff.
It's your highest honors and what you're known for.
Yeah, the elevated
Position.
Yeah.
It's most famous people have something on the midheaven because that's how we know them. Otherwise, we wouldn't know them from the guy next door.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the ascendant itself is the face you present. It's how you look, your fashion sense, what you choose.
And how you think of yourself.
Yeah.
That's something that's occurred to me over time, because trying to kind of differentiate between the face to the world versus your career and how you present yourself and all that stuff. And it's like, it's what you see in the mirror and how people see you when they meet you. And then the 10th house is like your LinkedIn profile, or what people see when they look at your resume, or like read your blog. It's
what you present, though, but you can curate.
Oh, for sure.
Both.
You can curate the midheaven better than you can curate the ascendant, but you definitely, they're both more curated than, say, the moon sign or your sun sign.
So if we say that the midheaven is your creation of your blog and so on, you've recently launched a new blog.
I did.
And would you say that the way you're presenting this website and your colors and whatnot is representing your midheaven?
Well, I mean, my midheaven is in Leo, so the fact that I even have a blog is... Yeah,
I think so, because it's the pink.
It's bold. It's pink. It's all caps.
It's once you get to Arwynne's blog, it's not to be missed. It's not to be forgotten. It's not bland. It's not blah blah, and it's certainly not vanilla. It's to the point. It's incisive. It's radical, if I may. But still, it's bright pink, and it's quite girly in a way.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, is it showtime? It's representing that Leo midheaven. You're not just got a grey old website.
No, it's bold and bright.
And big and the story. So that comes through as well. That's what we present, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But you don't really have any planets on your midheaven, or in your GAQUELIN sector. But but the point is that the blog itself, or as you say, your LinkedIn profile as well, is probably representative of the actual midheaven.
Yeah.
And it's complex.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely struggled with the LinkedIn thing, just because.
Well, and I think everybody does.
I know, right? It's like, it's a tough thing, because on the one hand, you want it to be genuine or whatever and all that, but at the same time, you kind of want it to just be all business and
polished.
Yeah.
No spelling mistakes on LinkedIn.
Oh God, I don't want spelling mistakes anywhere. But that's
Yeah. So this is it. So that midheaven is presenting in it shows what you put out there. So anything in the midheaven GAQUELIN sector is going to modify that.
Yeah, for sure.
I've got Aries there, which is independent, and I just I don't know.
Yeah.
I do like my opinions,
Yeah, for sure.
Chopping, changing. We're doing this, now we're doing that. And then we're going to do this, then we're going to do that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. But the main theme remains, the astrology remains, and the color remains. But where I'm going with it is frequently is being reassessed.
Yeah.
But again, I don't have any planets there. So that's just a by the way.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
So what about the opposite, like, so the ascendant descendant axis and then the midheaven IC axis.
Yes.
So you would also count the ones that are opposite in GAQUELIN sectors.
Yes, because so for instance, the IC has its own GAQUELIN sector of 10 degrees either side.
Yeah.
But I think the thing is, you don't see this. Others don't see it because it's your private, it's your home, it's the foundation, it's where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So if you do happen to have planets conjoined your IC, they'll either be in the third or the fourth house. Yeah. And these are all like neighborhood kids and what you were doing and your core family, right? Or where you came from, or your stock, if you will, or your cultural background.
Yeah.
So we don't always have that publicly visible.
Yeah, the fourth house being like, your home or your family of origin. And the third house could either be your neighborhood or it could be the thoughts in your head.
Yeah. So we're not seeing that. I mean, most people are not going to see your home.
Yeah.
However, even though you particularly don't have any planets conjoined your IC, you do have a planet in your GAQUELIN sector on the IC, right?
Yeah, I do, in the third house.
Can we have a little chat about that?
Yeah, that would be great.
Why not?
I love my Jupiter in the third house.
Well, you're going to love it more now because it's in the GAQUELIN sector of the IC.
Exactly.
Right.
I consider that my information junkie planet.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that your research planet?
Yeah, my
It's got to
research,
be.
it's my library, it's my verbosity. It's the fact that I can't go anywhere without listening to an audiobook on my headphones. I can't fall asleep without listening to an audiobook or a podcast on my headphones.
You're just speaking this planet.
Yeah.
Also, let's just also point out that the Jupiter is retrograde. So you're continuously going back and revising and reviewing and editing.
Hell yeah.
Even what you're saying, what you thought, or you said something, you think, I shouldn't have said that maybe, or I should have said this, or whatever it is.
I will read blog posts that I wrote years ago, and if I see a spelling mistake or a grammar error, God
Really?
forbid, if I see that, I will freak out and actually correct it. In a blog post from years ago that no one is looking at. Nobody. But I know it's there. And I'm like, oh, why would I say that instead of who? Oh my God, what the hell was I thinking? And I'll fix it, which is crazy.
So would you then say that this Jupiter energy in your chart, you're using it in private, clearly, and in your third house, in your writing, in your career, and what have you there, but it's not being projected outside, so we're not tending to see it.
I mean, it is... It's
only when you get to know you.
Yeah, I mean, and also, like, my career is communications, so... Yeah, I'm definitely putting that to work. But that's also the fact that I've got all those Virgo planets in the 10th house.
Yes.
So that's just a career in writing and communications right there. But
we can see this Jupiter energy.
But the Jupiter energy is what fuels that. Because if I didn't like words and if I couldn't read a paragraph and not want to correct the grammar of it, then I wouldn't be able to enjoy what I do for a living. Like I would like
to say too that because I know you, that you spend a lot of time out and about in your environment.
Yeah.
You're here, there, and everywhere. And,
totally.
Around the block, skating, actively going here and there.
Yeah, and I don't drive, so I'm always walking and getting groceries or doing errands. I was doing an errand right before this.
Right before the podcast.
I came in all brow sweaty.
All of a flutter.
All a flutter because my errands didn't work out the way I wanted them to. I was rushing around.
Yeah. So previously when you've looked at your chart and you said, oh yes, nothing's conjoined my IC. Now you actually got a bit of a focus there that can be, but you can easily talk about it because you know it's there.
Totally. And it's interesting because with it being in the GAQUELIN sector for the IC, in not just in the third house, that brings in that childhood influence too. And one thing that my mother told me about, like when I was a baby, it's one of those little stories that you kind of connect with because you just hear about it and you're like, oh my God, yeah, that's so me. And that's that when I was a baby, like I was an only child, but when I was a baby, she used to talk to me constantly. Not the way you talk to a baby, like, oh, you're so, not that. But she would just like doing a running narrative, like my own little podcast in my ears about what was going on in her day. So if she was walking around and doing her chores in the house or going out and, shopping or whatever, she would be just constantly talking to me. Like,
so you were exposed to knowledge early on.
To language, to knowledge, to information.
Yeah. And we see it now in your adult life. I mean, we have spoken previously about your personal library, which is extensive.
It is.
And for those of you who don't know, it's pushing 1,000 books, which to me is pretty good going. Right? So that is there. It's a way that is being expressed, and you like secondhand books, and that's the same thing as well.
Yeah.
Right? Me, I don't. So that's an interesting way to express that Jupiter, or bring that Jupiter in on a way to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because it is actually expressing that IC, although we don't see it because we really only see midheaven stuff in people or the ascendant.
Yeah.
Unless you're living with people or you know them intimately, you're not going to know about these other things going down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you might not even, because if I just have my headphones on, you might just think, oh, she likes music. Nope. My friend and I, we go skating together. One time she was like, oh, you should listen to this for a second. She put her headphones on my head. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. It's like some electronic dance music, whatever. And I put my headphones on her head. And it's like the most boring, like droning on guy with like a British accent talking about the World War II, like, the Blitz. And she's like, that would put me to sleep. And I'm like, eh.
Well, how many podcasts are you following in that case?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I used to listen to a lot more podcasts. Now it's mostly audiobooks. Because, yeah, I do listen to some podcasts, but honestly, and this is kind of weird because I do like Spotify. We're on Spotify.
We are.
But back in the day with the old iTunes, like a long time ago, it was easier for me to see what podcasts I was subscribed to. And
Yes.
even though the interface is like now it's just painfully old school, it looks like a file system for like, Windows Explorer. It's ugly, but it was really easy for me to see, there's a new episode there, a new episode there. With Spotify, it's just a little too polished, and it's like it's trying to be minimal at the same time as being a little overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's like I can't really tell what's new,
Okay. Yeah.
It's just one of those interface things where I probably used to listen to a lot more podcasts because I felt like I actually had a handle on what was going on. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, it's just, I don't even know.
So would you say that you're the sort of person who never doesn't know what's going on?
I don't like to not know. Yeah.
There's not a day goes by and you're not listening to something.
Right. Exactly. And that's one of those things where I used to follow the news a lot more. And then it got to the point where like news stations, like news media.
Like radio and that.
Well, I mean, the BBC or the Independent or, newspapers that would be like online. I would have them all bookmarked. And so I would go to like a handful of newspaper sites every day and be like, okay, what's happening at BBC? What's happening on the, what's it called? CNN or whatever, like the big five, right?
Yeah.
And then they got so politicized where it's like, oh my God, okay, this, like you can tell that you're not getting the actual real story. Mm-hmm. And then I would kind of follow a few independent ones, and then they would, kind of go up and down in popularity, or they would fall by the wayside because they lost money. And it just got to be like, oh God, politics, has crept into everything. And now I just follow the kind of information that I want to know and hope that I find out if anything important happens in the world, because everything now just is an algorithm. Like you can't just know what the most important stories are, because the algorithm will show you what you want to know and what you've clicked on before. And so basically, I mean, my entire feed, it like is very targeted to like what it thinks I want.
Yes.
And not what's important and actually has happened in the world, which I find very frustrating because I would like to know a little bit about everything. And there's no algorithm for that.
Wow. Wow.
It's unfortunate.
So really these, any planets conjoin the angles or in the GAQUELIN sectors they are being brought to our attention because of their proximity to these important points in the chart, such as the midheaven and such as the ascendant. But you can also get, if you have planets that is close to the sun, not only conjunctions, we've got the under the beams, which is 17 degrees from the sun. And then there's Cazimi, which is less than 30 minutes in proximity to the sun.
And that's what they also call combust, I believe.
What you have is that depending on a planet's position in relationship to important places, such as ascendant, midheaven, or sun, for instance, they get almost an elevated position because of their closeness. It's like you're standing next to, the king when the photographs get taken, this sort of thing.
Right.
You're within their orbit, as it were. You're close, one of the inner circles. And planets in these positions have the nature of this type of thing.
Yeah. They say that if you're going to be in a photograph with a series of people in the newspaper or something like that, you want to be on the right, because then the newspaper will be forced to put your name, and then maybe if they get tired of listing people, it's like your name, and others, or something like that.
Oh, really?
It's the Gilligan's Island and the rest sort of thing. Oh. Where, you want to be on the right.
I thought you would have said, if there's a lineup of people, you don't want to be on the end because they'll cut you off if you're the son-in-law.
Well, that's possible. Yeah, that's possible too. But if you could possibly be on the right.
How close are you to the crown, to the throne?
Yeah, I suppose that depends on how many people are in the photo. If it's,
and how many planets are in your position. So,
exactly, yeah.
So it's something to it's a way of looking at a chart where planets may gain status by their actual position within the chart.
Yeah.
And, as I say, in this way, it's important to note it. I always note it, but you don't often come across it. But when you do, you need to pay attention, such as your Jupiter, which is, clearly you're aware of it already. It's not news to you.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I was just only aware of it because it's in my third house, and it's the only thing in my third house, which is, it's an important house to me because I am a writer and all that.
Yeah.
So.
But it's right there at the foundation of your life as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, that's neat to know that it has an extra boost of importance. Yeah.
So this is the benefit of even looking for these GAQUELIN sector planets, that Yeah, it's not going to change your main interpretation of the chart, but you're going to give that planet that is in the GAQUELIN sector more status than one that is maybe in the same house but not connected to the angle.
Yeah.
And of course, you do need to have a correct birth time to be able to work with these angle placements. And of course, obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious, but you do need to have a correct birth time. Otherwise, if you're just stabbing in the dark, you're not going to be able to do this with a noon chart or something like that. You do need a good birth time. But you can also do it on countries' charts as well. Not that I've looked at Canada's or the US, but anyway, those charts too may have that. It's as though you've got the aide standing just there, but not quite in the picture.
Yeah.
The man, I don't want to say the
guy behind the guy.
The guy behind the guy behind the guy. Yeah, that's who it is. You're the sidekick.
Yeah.
And especially if you've got a stellium, say, running across the midheaven, say you've got 5 planets up there, some of them may be conjoined, some of them may be GAQUELIN, and some may not be anything, but you just need to assess them as best you can.
Yeah.
So again, these GAQUELIN sectors are not the most important thing, but they do bring a focus to a planet. If you're umming and ahhing as the astrologer and this is your client, to make a decision, if you see there is a planet in this position of closeness, he's in the right position, it's like being in the right place at the right time, then this is where they come into their own, where they're adding something to an already existing interpretation you may have done for the person, and you can then say, yes, and we've got this Jupiter GAQUELIN sector here as well, bringing Jupiter to the focus there with all his energies and so on. So the idea is that you would first do the chart to start with, and then you're going to be looking for these planets and other things, of course, in the chart. But this is really what I call advanced natal chart work, where you can interpret the chart and do what you like and do all your Jupiter in the 2nd house and Jupiter in the 3rd house and all of that business. But then you still need to be able to make an assessment about each of the planets within a chart and decide which ones are standing forward and which ones are stepping back. So that's why it's a valuable thing to just pay attention to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay, so we've gone over the GAQUELIN sectors. We've explained about how they are to do with proximity towards the angles. And the other thing, too, is that I certainly encourage the listeners to go and do some further research into Michelle and Francois GAQUELIN's, their life, their charts, and there is scads of information on the internet about how this all unfolded and what they did. And I think it's encouraging that even relatively new astrologers can do some serious research that affects the whole of the astrological industry.
And he was just one of the first. I mean, there have been so many other... And the first thing you'll see if you look up the Mars effect or whatever, you'll see, of course, they had trouble replicating the results. Is that they'll always say that. But what they don't say is that this was just the beginning in a long line of research projects that have been done in the name of astrology, and that it's an incredibly complicated art and science. And there are very interesting things to be found out there.
Yeah. So this just shows, great. Okay, so thank you to our listeners, for those of you who've got this far. You are welcome to email us at starzology@gmail.com, or if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can click the link in the very top link, and send us a text with any of the questions that you'd like us to answer at the next time. We do encourage you to follow Arwynne, and she is
I'm at mspink.net. That's mspink.net.
And Arwynne's discussing...
I am talking about art and books and movies and, just anything that strikes my fancy. Yes. Politics sometimes. Yeah. And
can you hear the Jupiter in the 3rd house talking right there?
Love everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you found value in this episode, please do share it with anybody who would be interested. And certainly please do sign up for our newsletter. It goes out every Sunday, all with astrology-related information. So, Arwynne, thank you so much for once again joining me on this podcast. It's been a pleasure.
It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks
for listening, everyone.
Bye. Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the 2 main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer, or someone who's learning astrology, or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there. Or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. And I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.